Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So in the previous video we completed the registration section where we took the data from the user, just the basic information, and then we stored it in the database. In today's video we are going to proceed with the login. So we are going to do something similar there. We are going to take just the credentials from the user through JavaScript and pass it to the server, and then receive a response based on that, like after proper validation, and if credentials are correct then log in the user, and if they're wrong just throw back the incorrect credentials error. So to uh, to do this there are like several ways. One of them is to well, before that, I will introduce you to the concept of REST API. So, those who are not aware of REST API, so in REST API, whenever you make a request, the server do not store or server should not store any state of your request. Okay, so if I log in, then the server just authenticates the user and sends back the equivalent response, but for the next request, the server has no clue whether the same user has logged in or not. So that data we need to provide to the server. Okay, so we need to store the state of our user on the client side rather than on the server side. Okay, unlike in traditional web application where server and client resides in the same domain, and the requests are made in the same domain while the states are stored in the server, but in our REST API architecture the server do not store any state. Everything, once the client passes the request, whatever the request is, based on that only the processing is done. Okay, so to begin with, there are several ways to do it. Laravel has its own official packages as well. There is Passport, there's Sanctum, but I'll prefer Sanctum because it's pretty straightforward and most suggested for SPAs, like single page application. So uh, if you go to Laravel docs in their official packages, you'll find Sanctum, and in that I have already installed it, so I'll just go through step by step straight away and keep it short and focus mostly on the login part. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. Like, you run the command composer require Laravel Sanctum, then this will just install the package, and then you just publish. So if you go in the storage vendor folder, so storage and then vendor folder, the package is installed somewhere over here. Okay, now to bring those configuration files to in a very good accessible area, so somewhere here in the config section, what we do is we and also like somewhere in accessible areas, all the required files, what we do is we just say php artisan vendor, so it just publish, and it just publish the required files. Okay, so after this it will create or publish or copy the migration file from the vendor and paste it in the database migration folder over here. Okay, so I have purposely created a separate folder known as Sanctum, but ideally, or in realistic way, it won't create a separate folder. It will just put it under the migrations folder. Okay, just to make it more identifiable, I have just kept it in a separate folder. Okay, so a migration is created, and in that migration it has just a basic skeleton of API token, and the abilities and other, just you can also modify this table. It's completely up to you, but all these columns provided, I guess they satisfy almost every requirement. So these tokens are useful to authenticate an API request. So something similar like Google Maps, they have API credentials, so you will get an API key. So consider this as an API key, okay, for your application. So if suppose you have a multi-tenant application, and if the users are using your API for certain services, then you might need to provide them API key. It's just a basic example. So those keys will be stored over here, and After that, we need to this is very important, so we need to make sure that we add this line under. So we add this line under our kernel.php in API middleware. So you'll find this file under app http and then kernel.php. So you need to add this line, and also you need to import this class. Okay, this is essential to make sure that the front end requests or the front request coming from the front end are authenticated well. Okay, after that, so the API token generation is pretty straightforward. Like, you just need to add a thread to your user model. So if you go to your user model over here in Laravel 8, they have separate folder models. So this I haven't created, it all just came with the installation, but in the previous versions the models were just outside. There was no separate models folder, they were just outside the somewhere in the app folder. So now they have like separate folders, so it's very much identifiable as well, right? So this has API tokens is a thread. So those who are not aware of term thread, a thread is nothing but a mechanism for code reuse or inheritance. So generally in single inheritance languages like PHP, they have a certain drawback. So to overcome that drawback, you have something known as thread. So this has API token in Laravel Sanctum. So Laravel this you will find it in vendor. So in that has API tokens. This is necessary to generate token on your instance of the user's model. Okay, so it's as good as saying when you register on Google or for Google developer or anywhere for API key, you get a key associated with your account, right? So to generate a key associated with a user, this thread is important. Okay, so once that's done, you can get a plain text token, or generally it's just a SHA-256 token stored in database, but for users to have it in a readable format, you can get a plain text token. It's like a long string. So after that, simple like protecting route. So in this, by default, if you go to api.php under routes, so here it's by default something like this, auth API. So you have API authentication guard. You need to change this to Sanctum, and this makes sure that whatever routes are having this middleware, they are authenticated with a API token, or they must contain an API token for authentication. Okay, so the API token is passed in your header as a bearer token. Okay, or in the headers of your request as a bearer token. Okay, so after that we'll go to CORS, which is like making something like AWS S3, where you make request from you secure your buckets by having the CORS policy or bucket policy, where you make sure that only certain domain can make request to your bucket, or certain types of requests are only allowed for your buckets. So all that something like that you can do for your server side application as well. So for that, in under config you will find cors.php. So this file is already available from Laravel 7 onwards, but if it's not available in you, then you can just get it from GitHub, or you can just install a package for that. Okay, so in that course you can define the domain, sorry for that. So you can define the allowed methods, allowed origins, and paths which are allowed to be accessed, or allowed to be accessed. So the reason this only works for API auth guard, because we in our kernel.php, so if I go back to our kernel.php, we mentioned over here like ensure front-end requests are stateful. So this makes sure that it's stateful, and it has that proper header setup so that everything is authenticated well. Okay, So after this we will go to our next stage of right. So I guess that's pretty much. Now we'll jump up to our code in login. So in login, what happens is whenever okay, I'll just go to the code first. I guess that might make me easy to explain. And here, so in the documentation, generally it's preferred to use Axios, or because mostly Axios, or whenever generally single page applications are done with Vue or React, and Axios goes very well with that. But in case of like if you are sticking with vanilla JS for some reason, then you might need to use fetch. Okay, so in this case you need to make sure that you first, whenever you log in, so only while logging you make a request first to this route, sanctum slash csrf cookie. Okay, this will under your cookies section, as Laravel creates an XSRF token for every XSRF token cookie for every request, this route send a get request for this route. It will save the cookie of Laravel session and XSRF token over here. Okay, if you remember in my previous video I discussed about CSRF token. So XSRF token is XSRF token cookie is nothing but CSRF token encrypted in encrypted format. Okay, so you need to make sure that the first request is made over here, and after that then you need to make request to your login or the route where login is taken care of. Okay, if you're not using Axios, you need to make sure that you pass this token with your request. Okay, so just to give an example, suppose if I just comment this out and if I give a quick refresh, be there soon. Cool, it's there. So if I make a request, just random form, you see that I got a 419 error. This is because there is no valid token with my request. So I need to make sure instead of CSRF token I include XSRF token. Now you must be wondering, while registration I use CSRF token, now I'm using XSRF token. So if you're making requests from front end, and especially if your client application is not on the same server application, or and your server application are not in the same domain, then you need to make sure that you include the XSRF token as a header. But if your client application and server are in the same domain, or it's like a traditional application, then you need to include CSRF token. Okay, so after this so this is just our alert box, and whatever the response is, it will just go in there. Now as I said that server do not store any state, we need to store the state of the user. Okay, so how I'm doing this here, I'm after successful login, I'm just getting the ID of the user and I'm setting it as a cookie. Okay, I researched on this, and mostly people prefer to have it in local storage, but as I'm keeping it for a limited time login, so I will keep it in a cookie with certain expiry date or expiry time of 2 hours. Okay, so here if I go to my user controller, so over here if you see this, so this is the normal login function where the validation is done. If everything goes good, then it just logs in the user. If there is an error, simple, that as we did in our registration, that if there is an regex error or something like that, then just throw an validation message. If everything is good, log in the user. If the credentials are good, log in the user. Okay, so how to log in Laravel. Okay, so there is generally so this auth is Laravel's I can, in a simple way I can say, a class which has a beautiful functionalities of login in the user. So this takes, and so there are various ways you can log in the user. You can log in using custom credentials like username or maybe email, password. You can log in using the user ID, or yeah, you can just two ways in that. So I'm gonna use email and password. Okay, you need to make sure that these keys are exactly the same of the column of your database, okay, or your table or users table. This auth guard, oops, sorry for that, this auth guard always works by default on user model, okay, or on users table. Okay, if you need to change this, then you need to change from config. So if you go to auth.php over here, you can change provider. You just need to change the provider from users to maybe your default table. Okay, and yeah, and sorry, the model over here. Okay, so you just need to make certain changes in this config file and then it should work. Okay, so we are just using the email and password to log in the user, and then we are getting or storing the user ID in a crypted format and the username in a non-crypted format. Okay, so I purposely use this crypted and non-crypted format just to demonstrate the use of encrypt string in Laravel. So if you go over here under encryption, so you'll find it under security encryption in Laravel docs, of course. So there it has a beautiful method of crypting, sorry, it has a beautiful method of crypting the data. So it just takes a string and it just crypt it using sorry if I don't pronounce it correctly, sorry for that. It uses chipper text. Okay, so it uses chipper text to crypt it. It's very straightforward. Okay, so if I go to the code over here, so what I'm doing is I'm passing this user ID in a encrypted format and name as non-encrypted format. Okay, and I'm passing this UID as a JSON string, because in cookie I'm going to store it as a JSON string. Okay, so if I go back, I'll just close this in a login. So here I've created two separate JS files just to store the state of the user. So the set cookie is useful for storing the login state, or the login user JSON data that we are getting from controller after login. We are storing it in a cookie, and then we are using this get cookie to just check whether we have that cookie or not. Okay, and we are also using this get cookie to get the XSRF token cookie. Okay, so the check state function, very simple. Just so you can find this two functionalities. I've just taken it from W3 schools. They are pretty straightforward. So so the cookie name, you will have something like this. So I'll just give an example. Suppose if my it's a string. So if my cookie is user, it will be whatever the value is. So if it's a JSON, it would be something like this. It would be a string again, because it's a JSON string that I'm passing. So it would be like UID and then encrypted string and name, person name, whatever the person name is, and this would be it will have a semicolon, and then it will have an expiry time. So it will be something like expires equal to, and it would be again a string in a UTC format. It's like a date stamp. So if I say something like 2020 12 and a times 12 0 0 0, oh, sorry, 0 0, something like that, and then oops, sorry for that, and then again it will have a path. So generally this is not our main focus. Our main focus is the expires and the cookie name, because we are keeping it for 2 hours. So I'm just passing it like it's a millisecond, so 2 into 16 to 16 to 1000. Okay, so 2 hours into 60 minutes into 60 seconds into 1000 milliseconds. Okay, so sorry, 1000 for milliseconds. Okay, so we get the user, we just check that if from here we just check from the cookie name, so we have a username. So it's just like simple for loop iterating over all the cookies for this URL, and what if it finds with the cookie name user, it just retrieves the value. If it doesn't find it, it's return null. So if this is good, then we just are gonna hide our this to sign up and log in over here, and we are gonna take the user to the dashboard. If this cookie is not there, then we will just keep the user as it is. Okay, I'm calling this check state function on my login because currently my login is my entry point, sorry, my login page. So if it's there, the user is already logged in, I'll just take it to the dashboard. Okay, so let's have a quick work on this. Let's see how it goes. So as usual, I have forgotten the user email. So yes, that's what happened when you use form fillers. You don't know what data is going back, but it's just a random test data. So yeah, so just replace this over here, and if I log in, let's see what happens. Cool, let's see the response. Cool, logged in. Cool, so everything is good. Now let's actually, I should have given a quick refresh over here, but after login, but I'll just do it now. So you see it took me to the dashboard because it just checked that the user is there. So Nissim, oh sorry, and Nissim, okay, cool. So perfect. I guess I missed one thing that about the auth, that so here once the user logs in, this it the authenticated users data, which is from the users table, so it will store this entire row after authentication for that state. So as it's in that state, we will just take that data. You can use SQL queries as well, but for simplicity I'm just using this. Take that data and pass it to the user or the client. Okay, so that on the next request, when we do this, this auth user won't work because it don't know the previous state. Okay, so as long as it knows that state while authenticating, let's just take that data and pass it to the user and store that state. Okay, so that's the general logic behind it, right? So this was a quick, I guess I talked a lot, so I'll just do a quick summary of what we did. So we use Sanctum for login the user, and we are storing the cookie or a token in our browser as a just as a state for just to make sure that the user has logged in or not. And we are using this state, which is nothing but a login. I'll just show you the cookie. So if I just go over here, cookies and user, so you see this is my encrypted ID and this is the name. Okay, so yeah, so it is my UID encrypted, and if I go over here, you'll see the name of the user. So I'm storing this in the cookie, and if the user after say 1 hour, as long as my cookie is just for 2 hours, so as long as it's 1 hour, is it 2 hours? I'll just double check, it should be. So let's check the time. Yeah, it's for 2 hours. So as long as it's for 2 hours, so this will work. After 2 hours the cookie will get expired and you will be taken back to login again. Okay, so when I just if I just refresh this, you'll see I'm just over here, and if I just go to login again, it should take me over here again. Cool. So this we are doing this using cookies, and actually this is a preferred way, but sorry, the most preferred way is using the local storage where you store the state and keep the user logged in. But I'm using cookies just for like keeping it in a limited time frame logged in. Okay, so because local storage, it doesn't get deleted by itself. You have to delete it, or the user has to delete it. Cookies, you can have it for a certain expiry time. Okay, so that's the overall idea of this login. And thank you for those who stayed through entire series of this login and registration application. If you have any recommendation, or if you have any suggestions for me to improve, please put it in the comment section. Please feel free to provide your opinion on what could I have done differently or something like that. And also don't forget to subscribe and like the videos. Okay, so see you in the next section, or in the next series, where soon I'm gonna do a tutorial on HTML and CSS. So see you soon. Bye bye.